The Board of Governors and the Academic Board of the University of Chichester are resolved to confer upon Piers Adams an Honorary Doctorate of Music. Can I ask Piers to join Governor Yvonne Chester so that I can talk about him while everybody's watching? Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, Piers Adams. Piers Adams is one of the greatest recorder players of our age. That can be put in different ways, and I'm going to say the ways people have said it slightly differently. In America, the Washington Post said he was the reigning recorder virtuoso in the world today. Slightly more combative, perhaps. The Germans, in Allgemeine Zeitung, called him simply the best recorder player in the world. The Daily Telegraph, nearer to home, called him sexy. International Record Review points out that the things Adams does with his collection of recorders defy the imagination. The prize for poetry goes to All About Jazz website, which describes listening to him as an experience as fresh as a spring strawberry bursting on the roof of your mouth. I thought we ought to establish who we all are here. I spoke to Piers and I said, "How did this all begin, Piers?" And he said, "Well, I learnt the recorder at primary school. So I just thought I'd find out. If you, like Piers, encountered the recorder at school, after 3, I'd like a really loud, resounding, conservatoire-worthy amen. 1, 2, 3, amen. It would appear, Piers, you are among friends. Now, no disrespect to anybody sitting in the nave, but Piers is really very good at this. Now, I think it's partly that he's very good at the recorder, but partly something to do with his personality and something to do with the personality of the instrument. So I'm going to give you a little, very brief history lesson. The recorder has a long history, but in its long history, it has had 2 patches of what we might call sunshine. The sun came out about halfway through the last century when everybody got a bit fed up of how horrid modernism was and decided it would be interesting to look at older music. That was when Piers got caught up, not halfway through the last century, because he's not that old, but a bit later, in David Munro fever. However, the real summer for the recorder was a lot earlier in the Baroque period, a mighty period 150 years long, which is as silly as saying that Brahms and Billie Eilish are in the same period of music. Now, I think it's significant what happens when people get good at different kinds of music. If you are a classical composer and you're developing and getting very good at being one, you're said to be mature. If you're a romantic composer and you're still writing romantic music when most other people have given up, you're said to be late. If you're a modernist and you're still writing modernist music when most people have got the hint, you're said to be unreconstructed. But, as far as I know, the only style that, as it develops, gets high is the Baroque. Which brings me back to Piers. Actually, Piers has brought something to Baroque music that it very badly wanted. He founded Red Priest, and if you're thinking Red Priest is a little confused with Judas Priest, the heavy metal pioneers, that I think is possibly partly intentional. I've been looking up on my trusty friend Wikipedia all the bands with Priest in. Swedish synth pop Priest is a band. Priests is an American punk band. TV Priest is an English post-punk band. And Richard Coles was an actual priest in the communards. I think I've exhausted it. However, what Red Priest have done is to put the rock back into Baroque. So our sort of recorder player, Governor Yvonne Chester, I present to you Piers Adams for the award of Doctor of Music Honoris Causa.
I confer upon you the Honorary Doctorate of Music of the University of Chichester.
Thank you very much indeed. It is such an honour for me to be here. I'd like to thank, first of all, Ben for that wonderful and very flattering citation. And I'd like to thank my good friend, the Venerable Dr. Crispin Ward, wherever he is, for recommending me for this honour, and particularly to thank the university as a whole for bestowing this upon me. So thank you very much indeed. This came as, I have to say, a quite considerable surprise because, as you've heard, I've spent much of my professional life going against the grain and against the musical establishment. So to find myself standing here in academic regalia in a cathedral accepting a doctorate is something, if you told me a year or so ago it was going to happen, I would not have believed you. In fact, when the letter, official-looking letter, dropped onto my doormat, I immediately was somewhat worried because I thought it was going to be another speeding ticket. And as I already had 9 points on my license, so I was obviously very pleased when I opened the letter and found that I was actually being rewarded rather than punished for speeding. Because the early days of my career were characterized by a desire to play at lightning speed. In fact, I spent my teenage years practicing like a demon in order to try and become the fastest recorder in the West. But I then went to university and studied physics, and it was only at that point I thought I'd give this music, this recorder playing thing a go just for a year to see if I could do something with this somewhat obscure talent. And so I went to the Guildhall School of Music just for 1 year part-time postgrad course, and then I thought I'd give myself maybe 5 years to see if I can make a career doing something as silly as playing the recorder. And that extended to 10 years, and it's currently sitting at 41. And I'm still wondering whether I can really make a career at this, but I seem to have done so along the way. So I've been very privileged to have been able to play all around the world. And over those years, I guess my playing has hopefully developed a little bit from being a speed king to being a little bit more of a rounded musician. And also I've learned a lot over the years about what it takes to be a performer in today's world. And I thought maybe I'd just pass on a little bit of that knowledge. I think the thing that I would say above all else, the most important thing that worked for me is be confident in yourself. Just be yourself, plough your own furrow, find out what it is about yourself that is absolutely unique, because of course we're all completely unique beings. And I think our greatest responsibility is to really embody that and then find whatever way we can to express that to the world. Particularly as performers, we must express it in the most big-hearted and generous and loving way we can in the world. Now, too many people these days are bound by rules and regulations, and we're kind of boxed in a bit. And I'm reminded of the words of a musician, an obscure musician from the early 18th century by the name of Johannes Mattheson from Germany. He was a composer and a violinist, but he had a real bugbear with people just following the rules. And he wrote, "Rules are valid as long as I consider it well and sensible to abide by them, and they are valid no longer than that." And later on he précised that to rules are what I like and as long as I like it. So I think this is a very important lesson to take out into the world, particularly if you're entering the world of the arts, the performing arts. There are no rules. Masterson went on to say in music that the only rule of nature is the ear. And so I think our ultimate responsibility is to develop our own ears, to get in touch with our own unique personalities and find whatever way we can to project that out into the world. I had the great pleasure, by the way, of working with maybe some of you here, I'm not sure, from with the University Baroque Orchestra over the last couple of years. And I was really delighted to find what an open and enthusiastic bunch of musicians they were, highly talented, but also really up for anything, up for breaking all of those rules and just making damn fine music. And that, after all, is the whole point of it all, and never let anybody tell you anything to the contrary. So when I started off my career, it's obviously very different world to the world today. Many of you graduates here, you may just be graduate level in your chosen discipline, but I'm sure you're all at least professorial level in TikTok. The world is very different. We now have much more direct ways to get our art out to everyone without the need for middlemen, and so it creates its own set of challenges. And one particular crisis which seems to be facing many people in the world, but particularly in the arts, is the rise of AI, which seems to be everywhere around us. And it's worth remembering that word crisis, many of you may know this, but in the Chinese language, the symbol for crisis is actually made up of two separate symbols, one of which is danger and the other of which is opportunity. And I really think it's important we take the new opportunities that we have in this world, both to work with AI, but I think much more profoundly than that, it really invites us to dig as deep as possible, as we possibly can, into what it means to be human. And there's maybe no better metaphor for that than being in a performing situation where you're in a room performing to another room full of people, and we have a very direct heart-to-heart connection. A real alchemy is set up then between performer and audience. And I think as many of you here will be going on to a life, hopefully, in somewhere in the performing arts, that is really the golden egg, which I think we should all strive for. So I guess it just remains for me just to say one last thank you to the university, and a big congratulations to everyone who's graduated. Good luck in everything that you do from here onwards. And I should just finally say that I do now have an entirely clean driving license, although I did have to do my 4th speed awareness course last week, so shows you can't keep the fastest recorder player in the West down. Thank you.